Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Ask the Howlers, a cybersecurity expert roundtable. This week, really exciting. We are going to be focusing on the topic of workloads. And so, with that being said, we're going to just jump right in. I'm going to do some introductions. My name is Stacia Tympanick. I am a solution engineer here at VMware Carbon Black. Bob, I'll hand it over to you.
Hey, thanks very much. And thanks for having me. I'm Bob Plankers. I'm a senior technical marketing architect. I'm in the cloud platform business unit, and we deal with vSphere and VMware Cloud on everything, I guess, and that sort of thing. And so along with me, we have Ken. Ken, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Thanks, Stacy. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm a product line manager, and I lead vSphere security. So also in CPBU, and Bob and I work very, very closely. We're focused on everything related to security in vSphere.
Awesome. Thanks, guys, for coming on the show today. So, we're going to kick things off and jump right in here. In terms of my day to day, so I am typically working with security folks whose main tasks every day are to do things like triage alerts, resolve alerts, right? They're the people that, hey, we actually need you to look into this. We believe it's an incident and we need to figure out what are next steps here. Those are the folks that I deal with. What I'd love to understand is how are the security folks different in terms of the people that you deal with in comparison to the people that I deal with? What are the folks that you guys are typically working with?
So vSphere admins, we generally I lump all of my customers into vSphere admins, and I was one for 23 years, actually not that long, but I think VMware hasn't been around that long. But the vSphere admins have a different focus, definitely, than security folks. As you said, security folks are reactionary; they're looking for things. There's also that side of infosec that's proactive, doing a lot of compliance stuff. I know we love to hate compliance, but that's sort of the proactive, prove that we're trying to be secure sort of side of things, and setting policy, things like that. Well, vSphere admins sit in the middle of that. They're receiving input from their downstream customers. They have to deal with app admins. They have to figure out how to get a workload to run in their environment. They've got to, from a security perspective, they're worried about the day-to-day operations of actually patching. InfoSec doesn't leaves a lot of that stuff just straight to the infrastructure folks. How to get things updated, how to operate things securely. And there's really vSphere admins will sometimes try. It's easy to say, well, security is not in my job description. Like I'm not really. I'm a vSphere admin. I'm not a security person, but everyone's a security person, especially nowadays. You think about ransomware, you think about patching, you think about just security as a process. Everyone needs to be on the same page as that. And so that's the struggle with vSphere admins is one, getting them to realize that, two, getting them to engage with that process, to be proactive about dealing with when an infosec person has got an alert or whatever, that can be a discussion. There can be questions, there can be all of that stuff. So it's a very different world. The IT operations world is different than security operations, but I think they can learn a lot from each other too. So I don't know
And
if
if
that
you
answered.
had to, that's great. No, if you had to like ballpark, how much time does the ITOPS folks spend with security today? Like, how many hours a week would you say that they're either working together or just interacting? Might be the
Well,
better word.
yeah. On one hand, I could say that everything's one of the things I like about security and doing security related stuff is everything can be related to security. So on one hand, we could just say everything is security and that's that, but straight up security, if we lump compliance in there too, and I like lumping compliance, I take lumps for lumping compliance in with stuff, but I think compliance is like the other side of the coin from security. It's the cousin, brother, sister, sibling, whatever, but um,
I, if I had to guess, maybe half of their time, half of a vSphere's admin's time is worrying about stuff that's related or directly relatable to security. And so I think paying attention to that, I think figuring out how to reduce that, because security is all overhead too, and not to lessen what security people and infosec folks do, but it doesn't move an organization forward. It keeps an organization from sliding backwards really quickly, but it's more like an insurance policy in a lot of ways. And so, figuring that out, figuring out what that percentage is would actually help us kind of figure out what we need to work at and work on. And that's some of Ken's area too. Maybe Ken's got some thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think you want to lump compliance in with security. I think compliance is sometimes a necessary but not sufficient requirement for security. So if you're compliant, you're not necessarily secure.
That's true. Absolutely true.
Not the other way around either, but it's more likely the other way around. My view on the original question about how the teams interact, I think it really depends on the particular situation. But we call it virtual infrastructure admin for a reason. It's infrastructure, and the security folks are more security, or like you can think of it as like the police and the department of roadworks and infrastructure. You have to build. I'm very big on analogies, on metaphors, especially bad ones like this. You have to build your infrastructure properly, right? If your infrastructure, your lane markings on the road aren't properly set up, or if you have the stop sign behind a tree, then people aren't going to see the stop sign, and they're going to make illegal turns or go through it, and then it's up to the cops to stop them. So you do have to coordinate, and you do have to make sure everything works smoothly. But just like Bob said, I think the security folks, or the cops' job is more reactive, reacting to threats and intrusions and addressing them, whereas the VI admins, or the road infrastructure guys, their job is more proactive, is making sure the infrastructure is set up properly so as to minimize the chance of intrusions or negative events happening. And provide the security guys the tools and the capabilities to more easily address and remediate.
Yeah, that's a big thing too. Like realizing that you're all on the same team is something we forget sometimes. Like the team is the organization, the team is your company. We're all on the same team, and the battling business unit stuff. The infosec people are on your same team. And maybe it's just an education thing. I don't know. But infosec people don't know vSphere. vSphere people don't know infosec. So together we have to work together, right?
Preach. Yeah, it's funny that you bring that up. It's a perfect segue because we have this vision of this intrinsic security messaging, where the idea is we're going out and we're enabling teams to work better together, right? And when you think about this, small businesses make sense, probably because there is one or two people that are doing all of the things. And so for them to have and be enabled to have the tools they need in vSphere, in Carbon Black, and you name it, great. Now you move a little bit up to mid-market, and you start to maybe see the teams aren't that big. There might not be that much friction. It still kind of plays into, they might be separate teams, but they know who's who, etc. But then when you get into the larger teams, I just find it ironic because they don't get along. I have to tell you, like, they just don't like each other. They don't want to like each other. They don't want to be on the same team. And the idea of us ironically wanting to bring them together, but then putting out an offering so that they don't have to be in each other's business, right? I can do stuff from vSphere, or I could do stuff from Carbon Black, and I don't need infrastructure touching my stuff, and I don't need security touching my stuff kind of idea. Isn't that ironic that that's the different message based on the size of the organization?
I don't think it's so ironic. I think it's actually very similar to what we're doing with vSphere and with tons of embracing containers. There was, when containers first came on the market, there was a lot of doom and gloom about this is the end of virtualization, and VMware kind of people were concerned for VMware's future internally and externally. But I think the approach that we ended up taking is actually embracing the containers and providing an interface both to developers as well as infrastructure admins, two groups that speak different languages, and providing each one of them an interface in their own language and terminology to essentially what is the same thing. So different views for different groups of the same thing. And I think here, it may not be the case right now, but ultimately the end goal should be the same thing, right? We want to, on the one hand, we want to expand Carbon Black users' worldview to also include infrastructure, because Carbon Black is heavily focused on endpoints right now. And on the other hand, we want to make the infrastructure administrators more aware of the endpoints. So giving both groups a view into the entire world and showing the other part of the world that the other group is responsible for in a way that they can understand, even though it doesn't force them to interact more day to day. It makes both groups aware of each other, and if done right, could actually increase collaboration rather than increase the gap.
Accountability too, it makes each group accountable to each other on many levels as well, and I think that's really nice. I agree with you, Ken. It's two interfaces to the same data means that you can pick and choose how you want to work with the data, how you want to work with the systems and things. And InfoSec folks have got InfoSec teams, people who are doing threat hunting, all that sort of stuff. They've got a completely different worldview
and workflows and all that stuff than vSphere admins do.
Right.
And so no, I think acknowledging it is good. I think we can go too far, which is, kind of back to your original question about the irony of it. I think we can go too far babying teams that really want to be separate or whatever. I think there's some working together that can be done, but that's a cultural thing. And one of my favorite sayings in IT has always been, you can't solve people problems with technology. And that's a people problem in my book. So
yeah, I agree. We don't want to go too far. On in the same breath, there's only so far that we can go. When you have companies that are set up with divisions, the problem is right there in the word where you have divisions. They are divided, and by definition, they have separate, if not contradictory, incentives. I'm a big fan of behavioral economics, and I think it's all about incentives. You give people goals and targets, you incentivize them to reach a certain goal, they will reach that to the point of almost gaming the numbers. And I'm sure you've heard, as soon as you start measuring something, the measurement becomes the goal.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But that's that's a little beside the point.
But it's not beside the point in terms of alignment, though. You're talking about aligning.
Yeah. No, that's
aligning
that was mine.
And that we were just talking about that too. Like alignment. We're all on the same team. Tom Korn always says, "What security is a team sport." Completely agree with that. It's the same team. So.
Yeah. I do feel blessed that. One of the things that's been good about working for an infrastructure company and coming from the endpoint side of it is I'd only really interact with infrastructure towards the end of a deal, really just to get approval. And I never really appreciated their outlook, if you will, just to be really blunt, right? It was like, oh, I just have to meet for this infrastructure team to get through this part. What I'm realizing is what's important to them, right? What do they get scored on? What are their metrics, right? Yep. And getting to see that lens into it just helps me be it better rounds my ability to show a customer value, and it better helps me understand how do I coach folks through that process a little bit better now that I have exposure to both sides. So it is something that I think is a unique experience that I've had by being in the VMware family, if you will.
Yeah, no, those are good observations. You know, the how to appeal to an infrastructure team, the vSphere admins, is completely different than appealing to an InfoSec team. Absolutely right. You know,
they do not care about AV, EDR, their capabilities. They care.
No, they don't want to get. They don't want to be awakened in the middle of the night because the stuff goes wrong. They're wary of change. Change is hard.
Exactly.
They get a lot of crap for making changes. Patching is changes. Updating stuff is changes. You know, and they manage all of that stuff, and they don't want their world to be simpler. They want to have to do less of this stuff. They want to be more relevant. You know, and I get that. You know, so.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving into the workload security space, you just Google workload security and it seems like it's the new hot buzzword, it's the new hot market. What do you think is driving all of the interest from vendors to get into this space? They all seem to be piling on. So why?
Well, I would argue that it probably should have been the focus all along here too. You know, you think about it, we've got all these security controls. Okay, the sort of monolithic security controls. We could probably talk for an hour about whether monolithic security controls are dead or not. You know, like they're dying or morphing at least. You know, the old school castle analogies and things like that, moats and big walls and things. And then as that stuff morphs, you know, even with those models, we've got these big perimeter firewalls, we've got, you know, all of this architecture, and what do? We drill a hole through all of it so that we expose our application to a bunch of semi to completely untrustworthy users, you know, and so now who have a tunnel directly into an application inside of our perimeter, inside of all of this stuff. And it's even worse too, you know, now that if we don't have a perimeter, the application is hanging out there. How do we protect that? You know, couple that with what we were talking about with vSphere admins and patching and having to deal with workload admins and app admins that maybe know the inside of their application, but they don't know that much about infrastructure or network topologies or failover or DR or any of that stuff. You know, like there's a lot of gaps there. There's a lot of gaps in knowledge, and it's not really surprising that that companies and companies are interested in helping with that on the workload side of things. Because like I said, there's big gaps there. So.
And I think that it's also interesting, like when you look at where we started. So I'm a bit dinosaur, meaning I came from when we sold our app control solution. There wasn't really cloud security based solutions at the time. Then we went through the EDR phase, and now it's the NGV is kind of the essence. But when you think of a workload, right, you almost go back to that paradigm of it's actually probably easier to harden from the outside and harden the build and harden what it should be running and making sure that that software is up to date, which is easier said than done. But my point being, instead of trying to react, let's be proactive, harden them from the get-go so that you're not dealing with that reactive state that also you don't know when's going to happen, how that's going to look, what that impact's going to be.
Yeah. Well, and then throw on their microservices and all of this container stuff and Kubernetes and all that stuff. You know, there's a lot of complexity. We're trying to deal with a lot of the complexity with, you know, systems, but the systems themselves are complicated, you know. I don't know. It's all a mess.
On one thing you said, Stace, about you know, it might be easier to harden from the outside, and I think, you know, that goes back to what Bob said, where we have the castle and moat analogy, where basically, you know, we started, you know, the internet started with zero security at all, and a good piece of evidence for that. You look at TLS; it was just thrown in there in the middle. You know, it doesn't really fit in the OSI model, so it doesn't really have a good place, but it works, right? And then that took us to firewalls. and things like VPN, which at the time was mind-blowing, but now that it's starting to get old and you think about it, it's still necessary, but it's still, you know, a VPN is kind of a form of a firewall. And putting fences around things can only help you so far. It gets, and you know, with the world of microservices and things being remote and distributed, it becomes a lot harder to put a fence around something that's not localized. But also, you know, one of my favorite quotes is from Microsoft's chief information security officer, whose name eludes me at the moment. But you know, he said, and this is starting to be old news, but he said, identity is the new perimeter. So the perimeter, it becomes less about putting up a fence and more about putting up proper controls and authentication and authorization, primarily for users, but not only, and controlled access in a distributed manner. So changing your view from building an impenetrable fence to actually tearing down the fence and providing proper access control is probably one of the better strategies. Approaches, sorry, not strategies.
Well, you think about IT, you know, like IT loves root cause analysis. Well, what's the root cause of all this stuff? Well, you know, we need application security and workload security at the root of all of this stuff. We can band-aid over it with miles and miles, thousands of miles of fence, or we could just fix the problem. You know, like when I give talks, I've got a slide that shows an arm with like somebody broke their wrist, an arm with a cast on it. You know, like the cast is all of the stuff that we're doing to work around what is ultimately the root problem that we've got. And the root problem is workload security. You know, like if we can make that better, we don't need all of this stuff. We don't need these inflexible casts that get stinky and fall apart and people write on them and things like that. So, I digress. Sorry. So.
No, this is great. So I'm learning a lot. It's really good for me to get the perspective from an infrastructure kind of lens. So with that being said, what do you think then over the next 6 months people should be paying attention to when it comes to the infrastructure space? Bob, I'll start with you.
Well, 2020 has been an interesting year here. We've got many boogeymen running around, boogie people running around to be afraid of. But I think in the IT space, what people should really be looking at in the next 6 months or sooner, you know, ransomware is a really scary thing. The way ransomware works is half automated, half the best penetration test you'll ever have. You know, like it's an attacker living inside of your network that's been invited there by somebody on your network, probably not intentionally, but they picked up a USB drive in the parking lot labeled photos and they want to see what's on it. Maybe they give it back to someone. You know, it's scary stuff. And from there, you know, they just sit and poke at your network. They wait until there's a 0-day vulnerability and they take advantage of it. They've got a better inventory. Asset management is a huge space that people don't pay attention to. You know, like, how do I know that I'm secure? Well, how do I know what I have to secure? You know, and figuring that out. Attackers have got a nice asset map of your network. And they know exactly what it's running. And when they see a 0-day vulnerability, they're going to take advantage of it. They don't wait 60 days for a change freeze. They don't file change records and ask anybody. They just attack. And so thinking about ransomware, thinking about how an organization trusts itself internally, you know, I see this, I talk a lot about Active Directory. Active Directory is a giant target for organizations. And a lot of organizations, especially at the infrastructure level, put a lot of faith in Active Directory to the point where they use Active Directory both for authentication as well as authorization. And it's fine, you know, a single sign-on in that I can, you know, type in my username, Bob, you know, bob@plankers.com sort of thing, you know, like type that in. But should we be really using that same system to authorize people into the systems? You know, what if an attacker breaks in? Zero logon. They can promote themselves they can take the account that they had in Active Directory and make themselves domain admins instantly. Now they can just add themselves to the vSphere admins group or the storage admins group or the network admins group, and then they just log in. Like Ken was saying, attackers' identity is the new perimeter. Attackers don't break in, they log in. And we need to think about that level of trust. What happens when somebody that we don't trust gets in the middle of that?
Ken?
I very much agree with Bob. I think this is very critical. Another perspective I want to add to it is, as we have more and more workloads in the cloud, both hybrid as well as cloud-only approaches, it's harder to secure something that's remote that you don't have complete control over, and it's harder to secure something that's split. So even if the old traditional wall defense method worked for you when you were completely on-prem and isolated, and you had a single point of egress ingress that you could control. Now when you have workloads in the cloud, you have a communication channel there that if not properly set up is vulnerable. So that is one thing to look for, but and that's probably more along your original question of the next 6 months. But looking out a little bit further out, another part of it is, if you're running a workload in the cloud, how can you trust the infrastructure or where that workload is running, right? How do I know that if I have a workload running on Amazon services or on VMC or in Google Cloud or in Azure, first of all, how do I know that they're not going to steal my secrets, or that someone's not going to break in and steal my secrets, right? So I have to trust, I have to have first party trust in them, and I also have to trust that their security controls and measures are adequate. But that also brings up, there's also another questions, it's all over the internet. How can I even be sure that where I'm running the workload really is Microsoft or Amazon or wherever? I have no way to know. So an interesting technology that we should be making more use of is something called remote attestation. And it's all based around having some kind of security chip on your servers that can, using various certificates and encryption capabilities, it can basically measure this, take measurements of the system that it's working on, and generate a signed report that you can basically look at, and you can be 100% sure that this remote workload is actually running on hardware that exactly what the hardware is and what the software stack is, and nothing's been modified. So this is called remote attestation, because you are attesting to the fact that the platform, the entire stack you're running on, is secure, and you're doing it remotely. And it opens up a whole lot of interesting capabilities for cloud workloads, et cetera. And then looking even further out, I think, some interesting trends that will probably become emerging trends and market directions are what we call TEEs, trusted execution environments, where you want to run a computation in a completely secure manner, either locally to protect yourself against other applications or on a remote machine. So you have to be able to set up those secure enclaves. It's the things like the thing that processes your fingerprint on the phone and that not even the police can unlock, this type of thing. That coupled with remote attestation lets you do amazing things, so you can trust that you have a remote secure enclave. And then finally, two more interesting trends are how quantum computing is going to affect security, and that's still up in the air, and it's constantly changing. And all these data-intensive machine learning AI workloads that are happening. One trend that's not directly related to infrastructure or endpoint security, but more intellectual property or data security, is a way to let different companies that have disparate, huge data sets that they want to collaborate on, and they want to be able to share the data and maybe run machine learning workloads, applications, on top of this data without giving up the confidentiality of the data. So for example, you could have a hospital chain that could collaborate with, let's say, a vaccine maker, and they could share all their patient records with the vaccine maker, who can run research, AI inference learning on them, without giving up the confidentiality. And there's various ways this can be done, but I think in machine learning, this is going to be a very hot topic, where it lets you securely share your data with a third party, so that they can run analysis on it without you compromising your data, without having to reveal the data itself.
And the vSphere admins are going to have to figure this all out, of course.
Yeah, of course, it's all their job.
Well, this is great. I do have a bonus question. I always
Yes.
like to bring in at the end, and with Thanksgiving come up in about 2 weeks, the bonus question is, do you like cranberry sauce? And if you do, are you a canned cranberry sauce person, or do you go for the homemade? So Bob, I'll start with you.
I don't know that I've ever had homemade cranberry sauce. It all appeared as in can form, in the gelatinous can form, and I'm not the biggest fan, to be honest with you. I won't not eat it. A guy my size won't not eat a lot of things, but I'll take a little bit to pay homage to the to honor the life of the cranberry plant. I do live in Wisconsin here. A lot of those cranberries are local, and but I will take a little bit, because it's pretty much the only time during the year that I eat cranberries. But I'm not the hugest fan. If I have a choice of something else, I'll probably take it.
Ken?
Well, as opposed to Bob, I don't know that I've ever had canned
Oh,
Whoa.
you're not missing, or I mean, you're missing lots of stuff. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'll send you.
Love cranberries though. Amazing fruit, and cranberry sauce is delicious.
It is. I actually have had both, and I will say it's one of those things. It's just not worth trying to make it homemade. It's delicious. It's in the can. It lasts forever, years. And the best part about it is that you can, after the fact, this is a D'Angelo's special, is you mix the cranberry sauce with some mayo to make the perfect schmear for a Thanksgiving sandwich. So that is what I'm leaving you all with. If you took one thing away from today's show, it is that.
Is your mayo also as old as the cranberry sauce?
Absolutely, the oldest.
Does anybody ever have any new mayo in their fridge?
Yeah, right?
Seriously, Ken, come on.
Do you make that from scratch too, Ken?
Mayo? I've tried. Not worth the effort.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, exactly. All right, guys. Thank you for joining me. For those of you who are watching, please join us for the next episode, episode 16. You can register at carbonblack.com/ask-the-howlers. And it's going to be focused on holiday threats. So join us for the next episode, and we will see you then. Thanks, everyone.